Hello and welcome to the 12th and final day of Squatchmas. It's hard to believe that it's already over, isn't it? Well, if there ever was a night of sitting by the fire, gazing into the lights of the Christmas tree while listening to a good story, I think Christmas Eve is that night. And tonight's story is another slow burner of a story, so pile that snackage kinda high. To let you know, tonight's story was written by Ophelia, who many of you may remember wrote some fictional stories for us a few months back. Those stories were so good. Most of you didn't even know they were fiction till the end. And it didn't matter when you did find out they were fiction. You loved them still. Oh yeah, there's a few of you cranky pants out there who gave me a lot of hate mail. Too bad. Go away. We don't want you tonight. Tonight is our night. Because Ophelia has written for us a story as a gift. It centers on Rocky, who was the elderly Sasquatch that remembered the tribe massacre from long ago in the last story. And there's also a female Sasquatch in tonight's story, about to give birth. So hold on to your hot cocoa. This story has it all. There are male Sasquatches fighting, there are soldiers coming out with guns, flying machines in the air, and humans who only want to help. And all of it told from the perspective of a Sasquatch named Rocky. Are you ready for this? Me too. Let's do it. I learned what Christmas is a few years ago. We Sasquatch had often seen the bright colored lights humans put outside just before the darkest day of the year. We thought it had something to do with that. That is, if we thought about why humans did things at all. But I was surprised when I learned the real story. It's a bit confusing to me, but I understand the first part well enough. I understand that long ago in the time of our ancestors, the Creator sent a gift to Earth in the form of a child, who was born surrounded by the animals of the village. I know that 3 wise men followed the celestial signs to find this gift from the Creator. And I see why you call them wise men. Anyone can use the stars to find their way. But those men understood that the gift from the Creator would be given to all the beings on earth, and not just to humans. They were wise men indeed who brought the blessed child gifts of precious minerals from the earth, much as our kind give each other rocks and other things of the earth. After all of that, I get a little lost. But as I understand it, the child grew up to teach love and kindness to the world. But since the blessed child has gone home to Mother Earth and Father Sky, you give each other gifts instead, as the 3 wise men gave gifts to the gift child. I was told you do this because showing kindness to another is like performing these acts for the blessed child himself, and that gifts involving love, kindness, and compassion are highly valued, as they are more prized by the Creator and the blessed child. Humans never cease to surprise me. Just when I start thinking unkind things about your species, you manage to demonstrate your capacity for immeasurable compassion. I am also told that storytelling is a part of the tradition of Christmas festivities. In honor of your celebration of love, kindness, and compassion, I would be delighted to tell you about the day I learned what Christmas was, as well as what you call the true meaning of it. It was a few winters ago, maybe as many as the daisies have petals. All the winters start to run together for me these days, but that winter certainly stood out. The time to head south to our winter hunting grounds had come, but one of the tribe was close to the birth of her child. We had waited longer than we thought we would need, but still there was no sign of the mother being closer to giving birth. The tribe was growing restless. A long journey lay ahead of us, one that would take us into human habitats at times. One of those areas was always a tense area for the tribe to cross, and we tried to move through there at the new moon, as humans can't see in the dark. We would also be traveling through during the longest nights of the year, which meant we could clear the area quickly. The mother-to-be was named Ayan. Her name translates to, "She who is like the leaf floating calmly on the surface of the river that moves in a lazy manner." It does not translate well to human language, but in our language, it is a beautiful and pleasing name. Humans are not capable of saying her name as we say it, but Ayan is close, so I will call her that. Ayan, sensing the tribe's restlessness, told us to go, that the baby would surely come soon, and she would catch up to us before we arrived at our southern lands. Female Sasquatches give birth without much trouble, and need no more than a few moments before they are back to full strength. Ayan's mate, Oak, would stay with her, of course. I don't think his name needs explanation, as I think it is the same in your language as it is in ours. Now this made sense, as two adults with only a small child to carry would move much faster than a tribe as large as ours, which had not only mothers with infants, but also the four-footed who had to be carried much of the way, as well as the slower-moving elders and any who might be injured, which, as many as was the number of our tribe, we often have at least one who is infirm at any given time. Yes, the new little family would move faster and were less likely to draw any unwanted attention. This plan was not without its drawbacks, however. As one of the largest and most respected tribes in the lands, no one dared to step up to us. If Oak and Ayan were found by those of the wrong tribe, it could go badly. In the end, it was decided that Susie would stay, as she was the tribe's medicine woman, as your people say. In our words, we call her Mother Earth's hands. She holds all the tribe's knowledge of healing. She learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from hers, and so on, each one adding new knowledge to the collective. She would make sure the baby arrived safely. Of course, I would also stay. These days I am chosen for these sorts of roles more for my wisdom than my strength. My knowledge of the areas that we would be traveling through would save a lot of trouble if we had to change course suddenly. But even though my hair had started to lose its color and turn white, I still wasn't to be dismissed in a fight. And Susie, she was no wilting flower either. I once saw her put a pair of juveniles who thought they would get too close to her right in their place. With the three of us with her, Ayan and the baby would certainly be safe, and the tribe's safety as a whole would be threatened if we were forced to cross through human territory on the full moon. The tribe left on the waxing crescent moon, and I thought that we would likely catch up with them before the moon was even full. But the full moon came and went, and then the new moon. I hoped the tribe was not having any difficulties. It was hard not knowing if they had made it past the humans without any trouble. The moon started to wax again, and still the baby did not come. Susie said there was nothing to worry about. Nothing seemed out of sorts, and we could only wait, and the baby would come when the time was right. But as the night started to freeze and the moon was waxing crescent again, Susie sent me to scour the mountain for herbs that I recognized as the ones she used in a difficult birth or when the baby was too slow to come. It was far too late in the season, but only the very tops of the mountain had snow yet, and there was still a chance that she could find something she could use, so I must look anyway. I didn't mind. I was making my usual rounds of the ridge and the trails that the humans still use. Not that I expected to see any humans this time of year, but it did happen occasionally. Oak was busy hunting to feed the expectant mother as well as me and Susie. Susie would not leave Ayan's side at this point, and with more and more of my hair turning white, well, Oak would have better chances hunting without me. This suited him fine, as he was an excellent hunter. We ate well while we waited for the baby to come. I had stopped on the top of the ridge. It was very late in the season for the ground to still be bare of snow. I had taken a moment to look at the sky for any signs of approaching storms. I saw a gray line far on the horizon. Though it was far off, I knew this time of year it likely meant that the ground wouldn't be bare for long. I only hoped it wouldn't be too bad. A little snow would only be a small nuisance, but still, I felt restless to be on our way. Just then, the wind shifted, and I caught the smell of cohosh, one of the plants that Susie most wanted to find. I knew Susie would want to come gather them herself, as she knew which parts of the plant were needed. "Good news. I need your help," I called out to Susie. A few minutes later, I heard a short knock in return, letting me know she was on her way. I relaxed on a large boulder, enjoying the late-day sun as I waited. After a little time had passed, I expected to hear Susie approaching, but I heard nothing. I waited another moment and started to get a bad feeling. Just as I stood up to investigate, I heard Susie call, "Come quick, trouble." My heart sank. Had there been a sudden change with the baby? But no, the call came from much closer than the cave. I bounded down the trail, wondering what could have gone wrong, when I rounded a bend in the path and found Susie standing with a man. I stopped short and tried to take in this unexpected turn of events. The man did not seem shocked to be standing next to one of us, at least not from my experience, which, to be fair, was considerably more than most. It took me a moment. It had been so long. After all, the man had just been a boy at the time. Then I suddenly saw him as he had been that day so long ago, a boy who was not quite a man, but yet was brave enough to protect his little sister as his parents faced off with a monster. And I had acted like a monster that day. I wondered if the boy had ever forgiven me. He looked at me nervously, but I did not sense fear because of my sudden appearance. But he was afraid and anxious, and he felt guilty about something. I looked at Susie questioningly. She just gestured in frustration. Susie was my best student and could understand far more than most others in the tribe cared to learn, but even she couldn't understand the human past the rush of his emotions. He had stopped talking when I appeared and was now watching Susie and me carefully. "Do you actually understand me?" the man said. Then he ran his hand through his hair and let out a deep breath. "I can't believe this is happening," he said. I felt like he meant more than just standing there with us. Then he spoke again. Hi, nice to see you, again. I am so glad I found you. I heard you calling out earlier, and I hoped it was you, but I didn't know after so long. I'm Jacob." He touched his hand to his chest. "I must be losing my mind," Jacob muttered to himself as he began to pace. "I'm standing here introducing myself to a Bigfoot." Jacob stopped pacing and took a deep breath. "It's hard to believe you're really here," Jacob said, suddenly looking embarrassed. "Or, I should say, I can't believe I'm really here with you, that you're still here, where you live." Jacob pounded his forehead with the palm of his hand with seeming frustration, but he continued, "You know, after that day." Jacob had been averting his eyes to the ground, as is polite, but he darted a look over to my face. "I often wondered if I had dreamed the whole thing," Jacob said. "If it hadn't been for my mom and dad assuring me that it did happen, I might still think it was a dream. But they also told me not to talk about it to anyone. They said one of two things would happen. Either we wouldn't be believed and we would be laughed at and ridiculed, and no one would ever take us seriously again, or we would be believed, and men with guns would come to hunt you. Mom said that you had spared our lives, and the least she could do was to return the favor by remaining silent. So I never told anyone. Jacob was getting agitated now. Well, until last spring, Jacob continued. You see, my nephew, he's my sister's boy, the sister that was the baby way back then, but you remember, of course. Jacob stole another glance at my face to see if I was listening. Satisfied, he continued. The boy, my nephew, his name is Riley. He's 14. He had started talking about Sasquatch, and then he would talk about the subject all the time. Jacob rubbed his hand over his face, sounding apologetic as he continued. I thought he should know the truth about his family history. So I told him about the day that his grandparents, his mother and I, met the two of you. I told him there was some scary moments, yeah, but you didn't want to hurt us, and that you saved us from falling off that cliff. My sister was mad that I told him. She was too young to remember that day, but she doesn't doubt that it happened. She doesn't ever want to talk about it. Riley asked my parents, who were not happy that I had told, and because I upset my sister, but they did confirm that what I said was true. I felt Jacob's guilt, but I also felt there was more to it than just telling other humans about us, upsetting his sister, or that he was the reason his nephew ran off. Then again, I suspected it was all of those. Jacob continued explaining. After that, Riley begged me to bring him here to see if we could find you or others of your kind. I kept telling him no, that you were to be left alone. I always believed you were mad at us because we got too close to your home, that you wanted us to leave, but you did not want to hurt us. So I told him your territory was to be respected. I thought he had finally dropped the subject, but now he is missing. Jacob was pacing frantically now. We all came here to my parents for Christmas, you see. That's a holiday that we celebrate. Jacob waved his hand nonchalantly as he said it, as if to say that part was unimportant, which it was to me. I had no idea what he meant by Christmas. Jacob continued, I think Riley was planning this for a long time. He doesn't live in this area and only comes once a year. We woke this morning to a note that said that he was sorry about missing Christmas, but he had something important to do, and that he would be back in a few days. Now, either he was oblivious to how obvious his plan was, or maybe he was counting on having enough of a head start that we wouldn't be able to find him, and we would give up rather than call search and rescue. I don't know what that boy was thinking. By this point, a feeling of dread came over me. Not only was a bad storm coming in, as in the kind that smart humans didn't go out in, now Riley was missing, and that meant the mountain would soon be crawling with humans. I was certain that I could find the boy, and probably quickly. But having swarms of humans around every tree would make it hard for me to move around freely. And that also put Riley and us in more danger. I need to find him, Jacob said, tears coming down his face. It's supposed to get down to -10 tonight, and I don't think Riley understands just how cold that is. Yeah, a few Boy Scout jamborees and the occasional family camp out at the lake, well, that didn't prepare him for this. Jacob said that as he swept his arm in an arc to indicate the harsh reality of the mountain. I know he has been studying wilderness survival, but books can't prepare you for how dangerous this place can be. I wasn't sure what kinds of things humans learned from books, but I knew that last part was true. We needed to find Riley as soon as we could. My need to protect Susie and Ian was fierce, but Oak wouldn't be far from his mate, and Susie was a force in her own right. I had to find the boy, get him and Jacob off the mountain as quickly as possible for everyone's safety. I was a bit concerned that Riley would cross paths with Ian's mate before we found him. I am certain that Oak wouldn't harm a human under normal circumstances, but finding one so close to his expecting mate, well, that might change that. But I knew that I could depend on Susie to keep everyone friendly until I could find the boy. After some quick words with Susie, she motioned to Jacob to follow her back to the cave, while I headed out to find Riley's trail. The human activity on the mountain had slowed with the cold weather, and I expected I would be able to pick up Riley's trail quickly. My head was spinning from the day's events as I set out across the forest. Luck was with me, and it wasn't long before I caught a human scent on the wind. I moved swiftly up the trail until I came to a lake that lay halfway up the mountain just below the tree line. Fed by the spring snowmelt this time of year, the lake was reduced to a few stagnant puddles and thick mud. The boys' tracks ran right through the middle of the quagmire. Halfway across, Riley either slipped and fell or deliberately submerged his whole body in the thick mud. But that didn't make sense for a human to do that. The cold day had already gotten colder. If it had been a regular day, I would have already been back inside our warm cave. I wasn't bothered by the temperature, but I knew that humans were fragile. Riley would be in trouble soon if he didn't find a way to dry off and warm up. The strong smell of the mud and dead vegetation overpowered the scent of the boy, but I should still be able to track him. I scanned the far bank and saw where Riley had climbed out of the bog and into the overbrush. Where would he be heading? He would need to make a fire or find shelter soon. There was no telling how long it had been since Riley came through here, but it couldn't have been too long. Just then I heard something. There were voices approaching, and they were voices of my own kind, but they were not voices of anyone I knew. I heard them just in time and was able to submerge myself in the murky water to conceal myself. I had renewed sympathy for Riley. I could easily withstand the icy waters, but it was certainly uncomfortable, and the slimy mud coating my hair was unpleasant. This was very bad. I had certainly heard 2 others of my kind, although there could be more. It could be stragglers heading south, a few who, like us, had been delayed for some reason and were now rushing to catch up with their tribes. They would most likely want to quickly pass without any trouble or confrontation. Then again, it might be a group of young males. Juveniles often would team up when they first left their tribes. As they matured, they would strike out on their own to find their own mates, but it's common for 2 or more males to travel together. These bucks can cause trouble from time to time, but mostly they are trying to impress any potential maidens and can usually be handled swiftly. But then there are loners. Loners were different. Loners seldom had anything to do with their own kind. Having been kicked out of their own tribes for disrespect or for not following tribal law, loners' temperaments were not improved by their solitary ways. There had been tales of loners teaming up, but that was so rare it was almost never seen. I suspected it was much more likely to be stragglers out there. I hoped it would be a minor inconvenience, and as long as I could find Riley before the strangers crossed paths with him, then perhaps I could still manage to get the boy back to Jacob before the humans and their flying machines arrived. I rose up out of the muck and crept silently behind a stand of dried marsh grass and listened as the 2 came down the trail. "It's too faint," one of them said. There was a large intake of breath and the loud sound of someone sniffing the air. The tribe is gone south. Gone for a moon past, I think. Then his companion disagreed. No, there is at least one left, maybe more. Then came another grunt. Let's just find the man and get out of here, came the response. The second growled in agreement. Their scent had drifted down the slope as they spoke, and I froze. Things had just gone from tense to deadly. These were no stragglers trying to slip past unnoticed, and by their smell, neither were they young bucks. They were not as old as I was, but far past the age to be traveling with the juveniles. My stomach sank. Loners. 2 of them, and they were already on the trail of the boy. And they weren't looking to escort him safely back to the bottom of the mountain. It's not often in my long life that I have felt true fear. The day my tribe was killed by the soldiers was the most afraid I had ever been, and the flight to my father's tribe was terrible. But after that, not much rattled me. I was also large, even for my own kind, so I never had any cause to panic. I had been in some fights that, I wasn't sure I was going to walk away from, but I can't say that I was truly afraid. I was going to try to avoid a toe-to-toe fight if I could help it. I knew very well that I would not walk away from a fight with these 2. One of them alone would be a challenge, but 2 was impossible. I might have managed it in my youth, but those days were long gone. I could now hear movement coming down the trail. It occurred to me that Riley must have gone into the bog to hide from these strangers. It was the only thing that made sense, and it was likely the only thing that saved him from detection. The voices were close now. I am telling you, the tribe is long gone. The speaker received a sullen grunt in reply. His companion was of a different opinion. Maybe, he said, but I know there are more. Not all of these tracks are old. The one that spoke first made a low growl of skepticism. Let's just find the boy quickly and go then. This suggestion was met with a noise of agreement. Riley may have been able to hide, but not before he was spotted. I had to find him before the loners did. I waited until I was sure they were gone far enough that they wouldn't hear the water splash as I climbed out of the quagmire. I headed into the woods where I figured the boy had headed after he climbed out of the bog. The trail led me to a hidden entrance to a small cave. I found the boy huddled in the back, inside his sleeping bag. I was worried that he would be frightened by my appearance, but I could hear his breathing and could tell he was asleep, or I should say, not conscious. I wondered how long he had been hidden in the water and how long it had been since he came out. But I could see the boy was not well. It amazes me how fragile humans are. It makes no sense that you can do all the amazing things that you can do, build large machines that fly in the sky, make weapons that can bring down a grizzly from a long way off. Why, I was even told humans have walked on the moon. Can you imagine what that was like? Yet you will die very quickly from the smallest thing, like being cold. It's a complete mystery to me. Now this boy had managed to find his way in an unfamiliar place, cross paths with the 2 loners that even I didn't want to meet face to face, and he was able to hide, get away, and find shelter. And yet here he was, on the brink of death, from cold. I could hear his heart beating, but the rhythm was shallow and out of rhythm. I walked over to him slowly. The last thing the boy needed was another bad fright. But as I approached, he made no sign that he knew I was there. I reached out and touched the side of his face, and he was ice cold. He needed to get warm. I lay down next to him to warm him from my own heat. I needed to get him back to Jacob, and then I could get Ian and Susie and go deep in the caves until the men and the loners were gone. I knew we needed to move soon. If the two loners thought the boy had seen them, they would search until they found him. They would not give up. Loners don't forgive quickly, if at all, and none of us like to be seen by humans. Riley was coming to and started to mumble, "Gotta hide. They're coming." I patted his back as I had done the day that Susie was crying because her big sister had been mean to her. I scooped the boy up and headed for the cave entrance. Riley started to struggle. "Let me go, let me go." He was starting to struggle against my grip on him. I could still easily carry him, but I couldn't have him announcing where we were to everyone on the mountain. I set him on the ground. I tried to make soothing sounds as I patted his arm. Riley was rubbing his face, and I watched as his eyes focused on me. Suddenly he went quiet, and his eyes went wide. He slowly looked down at my hand on his shoulder, then back to my face, then back down to my hand. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he went unconscious. But I could hear that his heart was beating with a stronger rhythm, and his breathing was easier. I picked him up again and quietly left the cave. I took a moment to get my bearings. I knew every rock and root on this mountain, and that was to my advantage. And I needed all the advantages I could get. So many things had gone wrong in a very short amount of time. I stood quietly, listening, and reading the wind, as we would say. I heard a low murmur from the bottom of the mountain. The humans were almost here. I felt Riley starting to stir. We Sasquatch don't have taboo words like humans do, but we do make rude sounds when we are upset or angry. I made the rudest sound I could manage in that moment. Just then the wind shifted, and I caught a scent of the loners. Instinctively I made another rude noise and immediately regretted it, because the boy started to kick and squirm. There was no way the loners could miss hearing that. There was nothing to do but to keep going, or they would be on me in no time. I had a few more steps, and I would be at the top of the mountain. From there, I could move swiftly downhill, even carrying the boy, and with any luck, I could still outrun them. I still think I would have made it, despite being kicked in the ribs and chest repeatedly by the boy. Except as I was crossing the crest of the mountain, I heard the sound of a flying machine coming up from the other side, and before I could decide what to do, it was above me. We were well above the tree line, and there was nothing to hide behind. Then a light as bright as the sun bore down on me as I ran with the boy over my shoulder. I hesitated for just a moment. I thought, maybe I should set the boy down, and the humans could take him. I was about to do just that when I heard a loud noise, and I saw the rock next to me explode in little pieces. Between the sound of the flying machine and the gunshots, I stopped thinking, and I ran for cover to the closest trees, which were back the way I came, so that's exactly where I went. As soon as I reached the tree line, I stopped running and concentrated on being invisible, which wasn't easy with Riley over my shoulder, although the boy had gone quiet. I think he was as surprised as I was that we had been shot at. Maybe he realized that if they were aiming at me, they would likely hit him in the process. and he then understood that we were in a more complicated situation than he first knew. The light from above swept through the trees, searching again and again. I waited. The humans weren't looking for a lost boy now. No, they were looking for a wild beast who had ran off with a human boy. I was overcome with sadness, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. The beam of light kept going back and forth, slowly passing overhead. Then it continued down the mountain. I heard the intruders coming up the trail fast. I had hoped the loners would have given up their chase with the arrival of the flying machine, but no such luck. I heard them call back and forth to each other as I bolted across the bare rock top of the mountain. My only chance now was speed and the knowledge I had of the terrain. I launched myself over the edge of a small ledge and nearly lost my grip on Riley when I landed at the bottom. I hit a small stream and raced down the middle of it until I veered off into the thick undergrowth again. I wasn't sure how far behind me the loners were, but I didn't dare slow down to check. I could see more flying machines coming from far off, but it didn't matter. I was getting close now. I could see the top of the big pine tree that stood at the entrance to the cave where hopefully Susie, Ian, and Oak were still hiding. Once I got to the cave entrance, the odds would shift, and I felt confident we could survive this situation. I was almost there, but it was too late. The loners had caught up with me. I set the boy down on the ground and turned to face whatever was going to happen next. I thought the boy might run, and at this point it would have been the sensible thing to do, and I think he would have done just that if there had been time. I had no sooner turned than they were on me. They moved to box me in such a way that I could tell they had fought together many times. One of them was slightly shorter than I was, but he had a wide set of shoulders and long arms that meant a wide reach. The ear on the left was missing, replaced by a large knot of scar tissue. The other one was easily a head taller than me and nearly twice as wide. I might as well be trying to fight a granite boulder. I really wished the boy had run. I doubted I could take even just one of these loner Sasquatches, and I knew there was no way I could stand against both. Just then, I felt the wind pick up, and snowflakes started to swirl past my eyes. The storm would slow the humans down, but I doubted the loners would notice at all. The smaller one, with the impossibly long reach, was circling me to the right, while his partner went left. The first blow came from the big guy. I staggered and was nearly knocked off my feet. I had to admit, I was feeling my age at that point. It had been a long time since anyone stepped up to me, and other than running off unsuitable young bucks that came around my grandnieces, well, I hadn't had to use violence in a very long time. As soon as I staggered, the second one darted in and ripped at me with his teeth. I gained my balance and launched my own attack. But his companion was already skirting behind me, and before I could spin around, he had wrapped his arms around my neck and was using his massive weight to drag me off my feet. I knew if they got me on the ground, it was all over. I fought to keep my feet under me, slamming my own weight backwards suddenly. The sudden change caught him off guard, and I felt a shift in his weight. I pushed my advantage and flung myself backwards, making the boulder stagger. I was no sooner free of his grasp when the scar-faced one smashed me in the face, causing me to lose my balance. His partner was ready for this move and kicked the back of my knees with his massive legs. My knees hit the ground before I knew what was happening. The big one stood over me with his lips pulled back over his teeth as he gloated. I could see movement in the corner of my eye from where I had set Riley down. I could see the boy had been slowly trying to crawl away without being noticed. I stopped myself from turning to look at him, lest I give him away. But he had already been seen. In a flash, the little one jumped in front of Riley and growled, freezing the boy in his tracks. I saw the flash in the loner's eyes, and I knew he was about to kill the boy. His partner had let go of me when I fell, so he didn't go down with me. Now he stood over me, ready to strike if I tried to get up. I snarled at him. This was my mountain. I launched myself at him, but he gracefully took a step back out of my way. At the last moment, I changed from leaping up at him to diving to the ground, where I yanked his ankles out from under him. He had already started to shift his weight backwards, and he let out a startled roar as he went over backwards. I wasted no time getting to my feet, but Scarface was faster. No sooner had I gained my feet than he came at me with his teeth again. Meanwhile, his partner picked up several large stones and was preparing to use them. I heard a loud crack, and my ears started to ring. I thought it was because the large rock the big one had just thrown at my head. His aim had been true, and it connected with my skull, stunning me for just an instant. But before I could sort out what was happening, Scarface launched himself at me in a murderous rage, just as I heard another loud crack. Scarface stopped in his tracks and dropped to the ground. I whirled around to see the other loner also lying on the ground, not moving. Out of the thick trees walked a man dressed the same as the soldiers that had killed my family all those years ago. I would like to say that I had become a student of humans by then, and I no longer held on to the fear and the hate that I had lived with since that long-ago day. But I can't. All I could think of in that moment was protecting my family. I am not sure what would have happened if Riley hadn't jumped in front of me. He had his arms up with his palms out. "Don't shoot," he called out. I saw the confusion on the man's face. He had seen me jump between Riley and the loner, but he could also see my face now, and I doubt I looked very friendly. "Stop, he's a friend," Riley said. Riley's arms were still raised, but the soldier lowered his weapon. "He saved me from the other ones," Riley said as the man looked at the fallen Sasquatches. The soldier's eyes were wide. "Are you okay?" The man finally got out. "I saw him," he said, as he shot me a look, "running off with you." "It's okay," Riley said. "He was trying to save me from them." The soldier was now staring at me. "I have orders," the soldier said doubtfully. "I need you to step away." He raised his gun again. "I am sorry, but—" And the soldier cast a look over his shoulder, and I could see all the lights in the sky, and I could hear the noise of the humans gathering below at the base of the mountain. "I have already radioed in my position. Backup will be here any minute," he said. "And there's a lot of people out there waiting for this area to be secured." "What?" Riley said. "No!" Riley dropped his arms and was becoming agitated. No, his kind saved my mom and uncle, and this one saved me from those two. They aren't all bad." "Sorry, kid, but I have my orders," the soldier said. "But he saved me," Riley was pleading now. Just then, there was an ear-splitting roar. Boulder surged to his feet in one swift motion, ripping the gun from the soldier's hands before he knew what was happening. The man would have died a second later had it not been for a massive shape that came out of the trees. Oak, Oak must have heard the sounds of battle from the cave and had come to see what was happening. Now he and the massive loner were locked together in a flurry of teeth and nails. The howling and the screams were fearsome. Boulder was a little bigger than Oak, but Oak was fighting for the safety of his mate and infant child. The battle was over almost as quickly as it started, and it was clear that this time Boulder would not be getting back up. "Riley!" Jacob's voice came from out of the darkness. "Uncle Jacob!" The two humans rushed to each other. I saw Susie coming up the trail behind Jacob. I grabbed her arm, saying, "We have to go. More humans coming any moment." "Ian is having the baby now," Susie said. By now, the flurry of snow had become a blizzard. The mountain was now silent, and I no longer saw any lights in the sky. A crackling metallic sound broke through the air. A voice was saying, "We had to ground the choppers. Snow is building up fast. We can't get to you. Find shelter, and we will keep you informed." Oak was already striding back towards the cave, and Susie rushed to follow him. I looked at Jacob and motioned for him to follow. The last thing I wanted to do was to bring a soldier to the heart of our home, but the humans wouldn't survive out here in the blizzard. If we couldn't get them back to their people, then we would have to get them to shelter. We couldn't return here anyway. I had been seen. We would have to find a new territory. Jacob was leading Riley down the path, but the soldier still hadn't moved. "Come on, it's okay," Jacob said. "But I don't know," the soldier trailed off. "I mean, you can't be serious. You don't expect me to follow these things, do you?" "Look, if they were going to hurt you, they wouldn't have saved you," Jacob called back. The soldier opened his mouth as if to speak, but closed it again. "Well, I don't know about you," Riley snapped, "but I'm really cold, and I don't want to sit on the side of a mountain for hours in a blizzard." The soldier quickly hurried down the path after the group. When we all reached the cave, I could hear moans of pain. Susie was kneeling next to Ian, and she was looking worried. The men had entered the cave and were now huddled by the entrance, being glared at by Oak. "Is that one hurt?" the soldier asked as he looked at Jacob. "No, she's having a baby," Jacob replied. The men fell silent as they watched. Susie's brow was creased, and I was beginning to be afraid again. My heart sank when I saw the pool of blood on the cave floor. I generally wasn't involved in births, but the few that I had seen seemed to be pretty straightforward, not like this at all. Another look from Susie told me that it was worse than I had started to suspect. "Is she okay?" The soldier was whispering now as the men sat together in the far corner of the cave. "I don't know," Jacob said as he shook his head. "She was in labor when we got here, but I don't think things are going well. She seems to be losing a lot of blood." "Can you do anything?" Riley pleaded with his uncle. Jacob shook his head. "I wouldn't have a clue where to start." "I do," said a voice. Jacob and Riley looked at the soldier. "I'm a medic as well." He hesitated. "But will they even let me? That one," and he gestured towards me, "I don't think that one likes me. He keeps looking at me like I slapped his mama or something." No, it's okay," Jacob said. "I think they will know you are helping." "Are you sure?" the soldier said. "Absolutely." Jacob's voice didn't sound as sure as his words were, though. "Well, I need my bag. I dropped it in the trees when I shot those things." "I'll go get it," Riley said as he got to his feet. I moved to stop him. I put my hand on his chest, and he sat back down. As I headed for the entrance to the cave, I heard the soldier's surprise. Does he understand us?" "Yep, am pretty sure," were the replies that came from Jacob and Riley. The snow was up to my calves, and it took me a few moments to find the man's bag under the drifting snow. By the time I was back in the cave, I could see that things were getting worse. The soldier's eyes were wide as I sat his bag down in front of him. The man carefully approached Ian. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he said. Then he looked back at the other humans, who nodded to him reassuringly. At first he was tentative as he crouched over Ian, but soon his face turned into a mask of concentration. With one loud growl from Ian, the baby was out, but the man still looked worried. The baby was still and silent. My heart sank. "Everything okay over there?" Jacob asked, sounding worried. "No, not really. The baby's not breathing," he said. The soldier lay the baby on the ground and leaned over it, breathing into its mouth. He carefully cradled the baby and firmly thumped it on the back, and then blew into its mouth again. He did this again, and after a long moment and another hard thump on the back, the baby started to wail. Everyone, both human and Sasquatch, had been holding their breath, waiting for the baby, and together they let out a collective breath. The other two humans were slapping the soldier on the back as Susie placed the baby in the mother's arms. "Congratulations, it's a boy." The soldier was now grinning. The fact that he was going to shoot me just a short time ago was seemingly forgotten. "Thank God," Jacob said, as he had tears in his eyes. "I think we've gotten more than our fair share of Christmas miracles tonight," he said. That night, 5 Sasquatch and 3 humans huddled in the cave, waiting for the storm to stop. That is the night the humans told us the story of Christmas and the gift of the blessed child. When the morning came, the snow had stopped. We helped the humans down the trail until we were sure they were close enough that they could make it on their own. Then we Sasquatches turned south to join our tribe. I wasn't worried about returning in the spring. The soldier had promised us that he would never tell anyone. As far as the rest of the humans knew, he killed the monster that had been seen carrying Riley over the mountain. This is the first year since that happened that I've gotten the opportunity to celebrate Christmas since then. But even though we don't have traditions like humans do, we still take a moment every year to remember how a soldier saved the life of Ian and Oak's baby. And that is how a Sasquatch baby ended up with the name Jesus, named in honor of the blessed child who values kindness and compassion above all else. Thank you all for allowing me to share this tradition with you. It has been my honor. Signed, Rocky. All right. Well, thank you, Ophelia, for giving us a wonderful gift this Christmas Eve. Now, if you want to hear the other 2 stories by Ophelia that talk about the Sasquatch tribe being massacred and Rocky remembering seeing it all, they're really stellar stories. I'll put links to both of those in the video description below. But otherwise, folks, we have come to the end of another 12 days of Squatchmas. You know, it went by fast, didn't it? I hope that everyone has a wonderful Christmas and a gentle New Year. As for me, well, I'll be taking a little time off for the holidays. I think I'll be returning on Friday, January 3rd. I believe that's it. Might be the following Tuesday, but I think it's Friday, January 3rd. Like a lot of people, I'm going to take some time off for the holidays. But who knows? I might find myself holed up in my office one day, frantically putting together a crazy little marathon for all of you in between. Who knows? Just keep your eyes out. Anything is possible. Well, until we do meet up again, you know what I'm going to say. Please, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening. And Merry Squatchmas with love to all of you from Nance and Sage. Good night, folks. Merry Christmas.